Hey, welcome aboard. Today we're feet wet over the northern Arabian Gulf, southeast bound, about 70 miles to the east of Kuwait City, headed towards Mom. We're on hour 5 of a 6-hour combat sortie, in which we supported ground, United States, and coalition forces defending freedom over Iraq. We're getting a little low on gas, and our Charlie, or overhead time, is in about 50 minutes. So we're going to need a little bit of gas from this KC-135 Romeo Stratotanker that you see off the nose, so we can bust her or hurry home in order to make our Charlie time. So the boom operator has directed us to go directly astern, straight to pre-contact. The ideal pre-contact position for this receiver is stabilized behind the drogue about 5 feet. When cleared to contact by the boom operator, we're going to move forward to make contact, but instead of like other receivers targeting 3 to 5 knots of closure, we're going to be a little slower and use about 2 knots. Anything faster than that can cause the hose to whip around with a high probability of probe damage. After contact, we'll push up the probe slightly, offset in this case to the left, from the boom to make the hose adopt a U shape to one side. This position allows about 5 feet of forward and aft movement. We must be very careful to prevent the hose from looping around the probe or touching the aircraft's nose. The entire assembly, which we have dubbed the Iron Maiden, weighs over 250 pounds with fuel in the hose, and if it gets caught on the AOA probe, which is directly below the refueling probe, it can separate the probe from the aircraft, likely resulting in the probe getting sucked down the right intake and the motor of the aircraft. Basket slaps on the receiving aircraft's radome are not uncommon during Iron Maiden taking, and like a matador fighting a bull, the entire exercise requires a tremendous amount of focus from the pilot behind the controls. The Iron Maiden is a BDA, or boom drogue assembly, which is a 9-foot hose attached to the end of the telescoping part of the boom, which is kept fully extended while the BDA is in use. Because of the much smaller position keeping tolerance with the Iron Maiden, staying properly connected to the BDA is considerably more difficult than staying in a traditional hose and drogue configuration. Unlike the soft canvas baskets used in most drogue systems, BDA units use a steel, heavy basket, grimly known as the Iron Maiden by naval aviators because of its unforgiving nature. Soft drogues can be contacted slightly off-center, where the probe slides into the hose receptacle by the canvas drogue. The metal drogue, however, when contacted even slightly off-center, will immediately pivot out of place, potentially slapping or bucking, impacting the fuselage of the aircraft and causing serious damage. Even a small nick of the Iron Maiden onto the aircraft's radome will cause significant damage. Now the good news is, since the Iron Maiden is so heavy, it generally doesn't move around very much for the receiver in pre-contact. The bad news is that once you get into the Iron Maiden, and like you see in the video now, while we've pushed it up, we've made that good U shape that we want, and we're holding in position, it's very difficult to stay in position. Let's take a look at what we're doing now. So you see that we're in contact with the drogue. The telescoping part of the boom is in fully extended, and right on top of that you'll see 2 wings in a V-shaped pattern. That's literally how the boom operator flies the boom. They act like wings, and the boom operator can move the boom to the left or to the right or up and down as required. Unlike in conventional taking, where the boom operator drives the rigid boom into the receiving aircraft, in this case the boom operator is just going to try to keep the boom still so that the pilot can make the appropriate corrections. Should the boom operator and the pilot both make a correction at the same time, the sum of those 2 corrections could be way more than what's required, resulting in damage to the boom or the receiving aircraft. So instead, the boom operator can't lock the boom in place, but is simply going to try to fly it into a steady neutral position so the pilot can go to work. Okay, so the tanker's starting to roll to the right, and this is where it gets a little bit difficult. So you can see that my eyes are fixed directly on the Iron Maiden and at the tip of the boom. I'm trying to maintain that good U-shaped position that we talked about earlier. As the tanker rolls more to the right, it gets increasingly more difficult to maintain this position. You can see the hose starts to stretch out just a little bit, and I frantically yet smoothly try to fix that position to bring it just a little bit closer towards the end of the boom so that that U shape is preserved and it doesn't get stretched all the way out in a straight line. I try to hold that as we continue the turn and be as smooth as I possibly can, trying to hold this position. This type of maintenance between the drogue and the boom requires an intense amount of concentration out of the pilot. At this point, I'm closely looking at the tip of the boom, trying to be smooth and making small corrections for any kind of deviation that I see. I was just getting stretched out just a little further than we wanted, so just let me give it just a little bit of power. And push it up and a little more to the right. You've got to make these corrections very, very, very small. For a relatively small deviation, a relatively small correction is required. Anything greater than that can be potentially catastrophic during a tanking evolution like this. So we're holding it. Right now I'm probably a little tense. I'm going to wiggle my fingers and my toes. And you can see that I'm having a little bit of trouble with the turn here, trying to see exactly where that U-shaped position is in the hose. So I'm kind of looking above and below the canopy bow, above and below, trying to find that good spot. Now I'm just trimming it out and trying to hold it, looking a little below, a little above, trying to get it just right, and we're in a pretty good spot right now. This portion of the video is brought to you by my GoPro and my suction mount, as you can see it right on the back of my helmet. Right now I'm pretty tense, trying to make this happen, trying not to white knuckle the stick or do anything silly. I'm just doing my best to hang on here and stay in a good position. We're falling a little further aft than I want to be and a little more to the left side. So you can see me add a little bit of power and try to push it up just a little tiny bit at a time. Fall a little back. See, just a little power. Just a little power, trying to hold it. Tanker's still turning. Trying to hold it. Trying to hold it. Trying to hold it. If you look closely, you can see that as the Iron Maiden slowly rotates about the probe of the aircraft, you'll get a little bit of fuel spray in the front canopy. Not a huge deal, it'll quickly dissipate, but it's just something the pilot's got to work through as we try to hold a good position. We're just about done with the turn now. I'm kind of doing above the canopy bow, below the canopy bow, looking, trying to hold a good spot, trying to stay loose as much as I can, wiggling my fingers and my toes as I keep this right hand turn in, and we're about to roll out. Just like when we started this turn, holding that position was a little bit tricky. It's going to be the same kind of thing when we roll out. You can see I'm a little further aft than we want to be. Not a huge deal. I'm going to try to push it forward just a little bit. There it goes. Got that good U shape now and just holding it as the tanker slowly rolls out. Trying to stay loose, trying to match this rate of roll, and roll it out. Looking good. All right. Let's take a sec here to talk about the history of the KC-135 Stratotanker. The Boeing KC-135 Stratotanker is an American military aerial refueling tanker that was developed from the Boeing 367-80 prototype alongside the Boeing 707 airliner. It has a narrow fuselage and is shorter than the 707 and is structurally quite different from the civilian airliner. Boeing actually gave the aircraft the internal designation of the Model 717. The KC-135 was the United States Air Force's first jet-powered refueling tanker that replaced the KC-97 Strato freighter. The KC-135 was initially tasked with refueling strategic bombers via the Strategic Air Command, or SAC, when it entered service in 1957, and was used extensively in the Vietnam War and later conflicts such as Operations Desert Storm, Enduring Freedom, and Inherent Resolve to extend the range and endurance of U.S. tactical fighters and bombers. Little signature move. Nearly all of the 200,000 pounds of internal fuel that the Stratotanker carries can be pumped through its boom. The boom operator is stationed in the rear of the aircraft and controls the boom by literally flying it, lying prone, and viewing the receiving aircraft, or in this case us, through a window at the bottom of the tail. A cargo deck above the refueling system can hold a mixed load of passengers and cargo, and depending upon the fuel storage configuration, the KC-135 can carry up to 83,000 pounds of cargo or people in addition to the 200,000 pounds of fuel. She's a big girl. Let's talk about the philosophical difference between probe and drogue tanking. On the one hand, Air Force pilots require a rigid boom to penetrate their aircraft to receive gas. Rigid boom refueling is easier for the receiving pilot, who just needs to maintain a constant position under and behind the tanker until their offload is complete. Navy pilots, however, have long, phallic mail-in probes that penetrate the tanker's drogue. Navy pilots do all the work. Boom operators simply direct traffic and are safety observers, but as we've talked about, do not steer the boom. So the success or the failure of the evolution lies only in the hand, or the probe, of the pilot. Drogue tanking is generally slower as far as offload rates than rigid boom tanking, but Navy tanker jets require it so that we can tank off of other FA-18s overhead the boat. FA-18s can carry Station 6 or centerline ARS, or aerial refueling stores, which can transfer fuel from one F-18 to another. Most modern era tankers can accommodate both rigid boom and drogue tanking. The KC-135, however, generally cannot, unless equipped with MIPers or multi-point refueling system wingtip pods. The Stratotanker's boom can either refuel Air Force jets or Navy jets and Marine Corps jets, but not both. Alright, it's time to disconnect, so we're going to back out slowly, careful to not let the Iron Maiden impact our radome, and slide after the tanker. Thanks to the gas fellas, enjoy your per diem and your long runways. Well guys, if you enjoyed the jam, please like, leave a comment, and subscribe. Buy me a beer, the details are in the description. Thank you all for your support for this channel. Welcome aboard Growler Jams.